Ready to talk some time travel? Speaking of time travel, look at some of these old gadgets. Boy, howdy. Today, the author of Desert High. Gonna tell you some behind the scenes information. Hey, so I wanted to talk about a part of the book. It's not really a spoiler because this is 122 pages into the book, and it's not really essential to the story of time travel, going back in time at Edwards Air Force Base, California, which is the flight testing mecca of the United States Air Force. The Air Force invents a time machine, and they're looking for a guinea pig to go back in time to fix a small, insignificant event like a high school football game. I'm a civilian writing for a music magazine, but the story's gotten out to my brother-in-law, who's employed at Edwards Air Force Base, about if I had a time machine, I would go back and I would fix the game that Desert High had taken from them in the first round of the playoffs. When I wrote this story, I didn't know that I would have a villain. I'd never written a novel before. I didn't know that stories had arcs and that you need a problem and solution, you need a villain. And as I was writing, just ideas were coming. And the idea of a villain came. My dad was asking me questions about, have you heard of this millionaire in the desert? He does lots of flight testing and flies exotic planes and does all kinds of stuff. And he's so rich, that he gets to do a lot of flight testing. He's familiar with Edwards Air Force Base. So this guy who I name Ronald Bronson, who's the name of an old friend from Austin, and he owns an airline called Virgo Airlines. He also owns a record label called Virgo Records. Might sound familiar, but that's just coincidental. But anyway, as I have a little bit of long hair, civilian haircut, the Air Force hires me to be this guinea pig, and I become a civil servant. I signed a defense contract, have to agree to the military code of ethics and the rules and laws and everything. But so I'm going out to Edwards a lot, and I'm going through some pre-flight testing, survival training and whatnot. And this guy, Ronald Bronson, he's out there with his entourage on base at times, and he sees me being escorted by some military officers, and he wonders what's going on. So he finds a way to strike up a conversation with me, and he takes me out to a barbecue lunch, and he does his homework on me. He finds out that I've got a band, that I've got a music magazine, and that I live in Austin, Texas. So he invites me for some barbecue, the best barbecue in Kern Valley. It's called, this restaurant. And he takes me out, and just like a Seattle person, when they go to a coffee shop, I was like, well, I'll be the judge if this is good barbecue or not, because we have primo barbecue in Austin, Texas, y'all. So anyway, I wasn't smart enough to write a villain into the story, but this Ronald Bronson guy turns out to become a little bit villainous, because he wants to know what I'm doing, what a civilian music magazine editor is doing on an Air Force base, walking around looking like I'm doing official business, going in and out of buildings with some of these Air Force officers. So he invites me to a barbecue lunch, and he starts prying me for information. Hey, what are you doing out here, Doug? And I'm evasive with him. And he says, I'd really like to know, what you got going on. He tells me about things that he's doing, experimental flight that he's taking part of on his own as a civilian. And I start to realize that, the mission that I'm on, one of the things I had to sign in an agreement in my defense contract was, this is a top secret mission. This is a time machine for the first time ever, according to known scientists in our military, our government. This is the first time it's been done, and this is top secret. So I have a security clearance, and I perceive that this person's questions, he's an outsider, and I immediately start thinking about my dad. He was a fighter pilot and test pilot at the United States Air Force, a career officer, great guy. He's got so much knowledge still, all these years later. But I picked up something that he instilled in me a little bit, is that when you're in the military, you have a clear-cut enemy, and information given to that enemy is an act of treason, and it can compromise the security of our country. So I kind of pick up on some of that from my upbringing and my history, and I start looking at my current situation, having lunch with Ronald Bronson of Virgo Airlines, and I'm picking up on his inquisitions and his questions and his quizzical nature, and I'm thinking of him, you are a freaking communist, dude. You are the enemy. I am not going to give you one bit of information. And he throws things out on the table like, I could make lust control, I could get them worldwide. I could take your magazine and I could use my distribution channels to take that to another level of distribution. So he's tempting me with things that are attractive, you know, for international and even nationwide distribution of a magazine is a tricky thing. And just a little tidbit of information and background on magazines. There's different levels of magazines. Like Heaven's Metal or HM magazine was kind of a boutique magazine. It was we cover a subgenre of a subgenre. You know, rock and roll is one thing, heavy metal is a subgenre of rock and roll, and Christian heavy metal is a subgenre of heavy metal. And so we had a niche, and we had a distribution between 15 and 23,000 copies of our magazine. Every 2 months we'd go out to retail bookshelves in stores. The thing about magazines like Time and Sports Illustrated and Newsweek, those have circulations of a million plus, 1.5 million. And you know the clearinghouse, Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes, where you take these little, a bunch of little stamps, like subscribe to Sports Illustrated for $11.97 for one whole year. It's a discount, and you're like, oh, I'll take advantage of that. And I subscribe and I enter the contest hoping to win millions of dollars, you know. But I found out that those publishers, they have to clear 100,000 or thousands of new subscriptions every month, because subscriptions expire, and so you've always got expirations going on. You have some people that fall away, the retention doesn't stick, so you need new subscribers. And so Publishers Clearinghouse would give Sports Illustrated $1 out of that $11.97 that somebody paid for. $1 would go to Sports Illustrated. Well, if you know anything about Sports Illustrated, I think they come out every 2 weeks, so that's 26 issues a year, and it gets mailed periodical rate. You know, it costs more than $1 to mail 26 copies of that to some address in the United States. So it's kind of a lost leader for big magazines to have distribution. Anyway, I don't know if many people know that. I know when I learned that, it was like, wow, that's interesting. So there's a little tidbit for you. So this Ronald Bronson of Virgo Airlines and Virgo Records was offering me something attractive, getting my magazine to go to another level, maybe to, like the magazines that are sold in newsstands, like in your 7-Eleven or your gas station or your grocery store or Barnes & Noble. Back when there were magazine sections, we were distributed in Christian bookstores all over the country. There's like 7,000 or 8,000 of them, and we were distributed in Barnes & Noble and B. Dalton and Hastings record stores. But as far as like your grocery store chains, your Walmarts and your airports, bookshops, those were pretty much reserved for magazines that have huge circulations and a huge popularity and known reader base, which we didn't have. So that would have been an interesting thing to, if somebody was willing just to infuse, to put 10 copies of HM magazine on bookshelves at every airport, every grocery store, every 7-Eleven and gas station. That would be a tempting thing. But in my mind, I was looking at the guy going, you freaking enemy. You know, I'm not going to give you any information. I'm not going to tell you what's going on with me at all. And it gets a little tense. And so that was the story of chapters called Virgo Airlines. That's the story of how I wrote a villain into the story of Desert High. And I just thought I would share that. If you have any comments or questions, other things you might want to know about the book, leave them in the comments section and I'll do another video. I've got 3 more planned already. They're ready to record. I'll just release these a little bit at a time. And Anyway, Desert High can be found at, you can go into a Barnes & Noble and say, I'm looking for Desert High by Doug Van Pelt, and it should be in their system, and they'll order one for you and say, okay, Mr. Smith, we'll send you your copy of Desert High as soon as it arrives. We'll give you a phone call or an email. And what happens is they'll go to Ingram Spark, which is a print-on-demand place that Ingram, who distributes to Barnes & Noble, has in their system, and that order will go into Ingram, and they'll print one copy for Mr. Smith, and then they'll ship it to that bookstore, and then Mr. Smith will get a phone call or an email, and he'll go and pick up his copy of Desert High. So you can get it that way. You can also get it directly from me at hm-press.square.site. Sorry, I had to think about it for a second. hm-press.square.site. And also, if you want to get a signed copy, there's like a, books often have a page where the author can sign it, and I'd be glad to write you a personal note and sign it there. Anyway, thanks for watching, and join with me in the wonderful story that had to be written. Because I tell you, me and my high school buddies, we still talk about that Mammoth game, and if there was an opportunity for a time machine travel to go back and try to fix that game and overturn the results, boy oh boy would we. Take care.